Hi, I'm Gabriela Houston. Welcome to my channel where we discuss storytelling in all its forms. It's my belief that storytelling is an intrinsic part of everyone's life, as well as an important part of many professions. On the show, I talk to writers, artists, journalists, researchers, and more about how they use storytelling in their jobs and life. Every other week, there's something different. So click like and subscribe for more. It really helps the channel. So today's guest is Ruby Jean of Ruby Jean Photography. She's a Maine-based creative portrait photographer, crown crafter, and creator of the Goddess Session, as well as the owner of a beautiful cat that people watching us on YouTube will be able to see. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Ruby. It's lovely to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
So I first saw Ruby's artwork through her Instagram posts where she talked about focusing on celebrating older women. And I thought it was just such a lovely concept. And so we'll come back to it and like joining to the goddess sort of package that you do. But first, can you tell us about how you got into photography?
Sure. So I grew up with a mom who was a professional artist. She had gone to art school for college. And so, like, art and creative stuff, creative activities were always available to me, always encouraged. And photography was like always something that my mom did. And so when I was a kid, I had three siblings. I have a twin sister, I have another sister, and a younger brother too, but mainly like the sister squad. Like we were always doing little photo shoots. Like we would dress up my sister and sometimes even my brother, and my twin sister and I would like make little sets for them and photograph them with our little like Barbie camera that we had. And we just like probably started doing that when I was maybe like 9 or so. And we really just never stopped. And then I don't know, I think that you probably have something similar in the UK, but we had this show called America's Next Top Model. And there was also a show called Project Runway. And like my entire family would sit down and we would watch these shows like every week when they were on. I was probably about like middle school, so like 11 or so. Like I had had a few years of enjoying photography and then like just became obsessed with these shows. And like my little sister got like really into fashion and ultimately wound up going to fashion school, but she started just getting like pretty good at modeling. And like I would just like I had joined a photography club, and in high school, like I just really enjoyed photography. And then the two of us would just do photo shoots together all the time, and we just got like better and better and better. And then I ultimately like went off to college, majored in psychology for a year, and then just decided that like photography was really what I wanted to do. Um, and yeah, that was, I mean, I went to college. I started college in 2011. I started my majoring in photography in 2012. And ever since then, I've taken everything pretty seriously.
Yes, but there's always an element of play in what you do, and I think that's so important. And also, you mentioned you majored in psychology, and I think there's a big element, whether it's conscious or sort of subconscious, in how to make people comfortable in themselves. Because when you focus on portraits, especially of older ladies, it's I feel like, our society tells women in general that they're always not enough, they're not skinny enough, they're not pretty enough, and they're not young enough. And once they get older, they're told that they're just, that their worth has dropped, that they're undesirable, or like to quote TLC, that they're so unpretty. So how do you convince them otherwise? Like,
So,
sorry,
okay.
in your sessions, I meant like,
I mean, so I think that's like a thing that, like, because I'm only 31, and a lot of times I'm working with people who are older than me. Like, when I first started offering the goddess photo shoots, I was getting like, so this was like 5-ish years ago now that I really started doing them. And I was getting mainly people like in their 20s or so. And then like once the, Instagram started really taking off with like the older women, the more mature women, I like always had like a little bit of hesitation because I did feel like, who am I to like tell a woman in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you're so beautiful. Like they're probably looking at me and being like, well, wait till you get to my age. Like you're only 30, blah, blah, blah. So there was like a lot of insecurity with that at first. And so it's not something that I necessarily like address directly because I don't know, it does like feel sometimes like a little weird, I guess, coming from me. And so I think what happens more often is like they'll see the videos or like maybe their daughter or like granddaughter even will see the videos and it's like they're either encouraged by somebody else or like they're encouraged by the people who have already done it. And so it's never something that I feel like I need to even really mention to them. I'm not particularly like interested in working with people who really don't want to do it. I think like they kind of have their own like personal journey maybe that they go through before they even wind up contacting me. A lot of times people fill out like the form on my website and I mean they're telling me like a story that's this long and sometimes I literally never hear from them again. And I think like they see me maybe as just like a safe person because of the way that I portray myself online. And they just see me as a safe person to sort of like tell their story to.
That's
And
such a great privilege.
I know it always is like such an honor because some of the stuff is like can be pretty heavy, especially when like we're talking about people who are older and have had like a lot of life experiences. But yeah, by the time they wind up like actually at their photo shoot, like the convincing and anything has been done. Like I'm not there to like I don't know, make them convince them that they're beautiful. Like we're there just like to literally have a good time. And, sometimes like certain people are maybe a little needier than others and they wind up sharing a lot with me and I'm like kind of there to just listen. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a therapist and I'm also again like they have so much more life experience than me most of the time that they're really just kind of there for just like a joyful experience. So yeah.
Although, I think there's a lot of sort of more contemporary feminists talking about how we're like the generations of women are being separated in our culture, that we're told that we're not supposed to interact in certain ways, but actually it's quite healing and very helpful for us to interact with. So I think, in all what you're saying, that you're not a therapist, I think what you do for those women does provide a lot to make them feel sort of more secure in themselves. I was wondering, as a photographer, how do you make people relax? So if you kind of you already have someone who has decided that they're going to do this, extraordinary thing for themselves, but when it's you know you and the camera and you're
Yeah.
wearing things that you're not familiar with and maybe you're bearing more skin than you sort of used to or more comfortable with, how do you make them feel like they can relax?
So there's like a few things that kind of go into that. Um, I make sure that there are not a lot of questions going into the experience. Like with any photo shoot, like it can be kind of a vulnerable experience. But when you're adding like people who, maybe think they're not photogenic, haven't had their photo taken professionally in decades, you're adding a costume and you're adding like just a lot of unknowns. That's why like social media has been so beneficial because I just film the behind the scenes of like all of my photo shoots. So people are really able to kind of get a feel for what it's going to be like to work with me before they even step in front of the camera. But when they do get there, I think about the things that make me uncomfortable when I'm meeting someone new. And like a lot of times that's awkward silences or that's like feeling like I don't know how to keep a conversation going. And so I eliminate all of that by talking constantly. I mean, if they're not giving a lot back to me, like sometimes people really just they take a question I ask them and they just run with it and they chat the whole time and I just really get to listen. But other times it's like I have to do a lot more work. And I think becoming a good conversationalist is really important. Like learning how to ask people questions about themselves, like it's a really big deal. I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to the experience of like going out to dinner with somebody or like doing, a friend date or meeting like a old family friend or something and having them not ask you anything about yourself and
Mm.
how that can make you kind of feel like a little bit bad. And like I think that's why like I always say like the experience is so much more important to me than just the photos because for some of these people like people might not have seem interested in them or their lives in like a really long time and that alone like even if they wind up hating their photos, like being able to spend 2 hours with somebody who's like genuinely interested in their lives, that can break down a lot of walls. And like I have just really like honed the skill of like figuring out how to relate to people. I'm a very empathetic person. I'm really sensitive and like so I really am like very in tune with like, all right, does this person seem uncomfortable? Like, is it time for another question? And like I think part of that is just like the way that I was raised. Like my mom was always somebody who was so good at like interacting with people, interacting with strangers. Like we just randomly like decide we're gonna carpool to gymnastics practice with this like random person that we've never met, and my would be in the car and my mom would just be like asking this like kid who's probably nervous like so many questions about themselves. And so I really learned that over my entire life. And then like I've practiced it so much, like my husband will even say to me like you're so good at like talking to people. Like he's a manager of like a group of people at work and he'll ask me for like advice all the time on just like how to talk to his staff. So yeah, I think that's just like a huge part of it is just like being a people person. That can break down a lot of walls with people. And like when you can immediately put someone at ease, like just like with the intonations in your voice, like talking in a way like almost like you would talk to like a puppy or something, like and being, encouraging. And like if they do a pose, like maybe I give them a pose and like they misunderstood and like the way they're posing is bad. I am not going to tell them that it looks bad. I'm going to take the picture anyway before and
I
then we'll
mean,
move
if
on
you
to
can make people laugh, that's
make people laugh. Like I mean, those are all just like skills that skills that I think that I have that really has helped me have success with this type of work.
Mm.
I also like grew up with my grandmother living as my neighbor, so I spent a lot of time with her my entire life. Like I've always enjoyed people who are older than me. So when I was a kid, I'd go to like birthday parties and I would like hang out in the kitchen with the parents. So I think that's also just like a comfort zone for me as well. Like I'm comfortable more so with this demographic. Like even my twin sister, like she works in a nursing home. Like I think we were just born to like be around people who are older than us. I don't know.
So how do your clients find you, especially the older demographic that might not be on Instagram? How do they find you and who books the photo shoots usually? Is it the person being photographed or the family?
Yeah, it's a combo. I mean, there are some tech savvy older adults out there. Like I do have women in their 70s who are on Instagram and they're on TikTok and they find me and they book their own photo shoot. And I would say that's like probably the most common way that people find me, but otherwise it's a family member, usually a granddaughter or a daughter. So it is like pretty much exclusively social media, like mainly Instagram. I would say that's like 98%. Some people it's TikTok or Facebook even, and a very, very few people are finding me just like on the internet, like Googling it. People aren't usually like seeking out this specific kind of experience, they're usually seeing me and then wanting to book with me. It's not like I don't really, I mean, people just aren't kind of, yeah, looking
Yeah,
for
I
it
mean,
on their,
it's not something that
yeah.
you usually think about unless you're shown that it's a possibility.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
yeah,
So
pretty much
what kind of conversations do you have with them, with the people booking, with the people who are coming in?
so like the booking
Like
process.
before, yeah, well, not just the booking process, which is, how much does it cost, but more about like how do you figure out what they want, or maybe suggest things that they might not have thought about, things like that.
So I mean, a lot of times people give me a lot of information up front, but sometimes they give me nothing. And so, regardless of how much information is given to me, I start out with a questionnaire. And it's like a really basic questionnaire of like, is there a specific photo shoot of mine that you saw that you want to just like copy or emulate, or like that is inspired that inspired you to want to do this? I ask them what, like, when they like a photo of themselves, why? When they really don't like a photo of themselves, why? Are they picturing a specific type of setting, beach, flowers? Are they wanting to be inside? And then if they have like a link to like a Pinterest board or something like that, they can put it in there. But a lot of times people really like for me to take the lead. And so if they don't really like giving me a lot of specifics in that questionnaire, then everybody still also gets, there's a lot of steps involved. They get this location guide, which has photos of from all kinds of different seasons at like all of my kind of favorite places. And so that usually like is a big part of like how we plan. Like the location really kind of dictates like the vibe that the photo shoot winds up getting. And so if they wind up choosing, like if they're going to be at the beach, like I will, make sure that they know how crowded it's going to be, and like all those types of things kind of go into it. But people often, I would say, want like, I'll get people who are really into like witchy type of stuff, and like then I'll maybe make a suggestion like, because you really like witchy things, I might recommend this location and like maybe one or like these outfits if that's what you're going for. But usually like all of the things, like I have really got it down to a science now. People are able to kind of like build their own shoot without like too much discussion, but then some people need, a lot more hand holding from me. And I just kind of gently nudge them in the direction that like I think is best. And maybe they say, I really like a dark, moody shoot. And then they pick the beach. And I say, just so you know, it's probably not going to look very dark and moody. Um, that's okay. But I just want to be realistic with you. And so, there's some little discussions here and there like that go like that. But usually it's pretty they all follow a kind of a consistent theme, I would say, of the goddess sort of theme. So there's not like a lot of too much in-depth planning that has to go
So
into
how
it.
did the goddess, so what is the goddess session? What does it involve, and where did the idea come from?
So the goddess session involves a costume. So it's like a halo crown, which I make all of these crowns. They're literally just like zip ties on a headband, and they're spray painted, or sometimes they're shish kebab skewers, like glued with flowers and beads. And then I also provide like dresses. So I have like a number of tulle robes, and I would say that's kind of become my like main thing that people sort of recognize me by, are these like sheer robes. They have these big like layered sleeves that come off at the wrist, and like huge long trains. And so I have like multiple colors, multiple sizes of these robes. And so people kind of like pick the
Did you
color.
make them? Do you make them as well, or?
Don't make the robes. People always think that I do, which is so funny. But no, I'm not that skilled. And then I have other like gowns, but they're not nearly as popular as the robes are. And people just kind of like, they might, depending on the order of things, they might base their color of their robe on the location they want to shoot at, or they might pick the color and then decide on the location afterwards. But the whole thing kind of came from, honestly, the pandemic. I was a wedding photographer, full-time wedding photographer before this. And when COVID happened, my whole wedding season was canceled. And I was pretty bored. There wasn't like a whole lot I could really do instead because all of my photography is portrait based and was like people involved people. So the way things were here in the US, I was able to collect unemployment for a few months. And that same sister that I was telling you about earlier, she was living with me at the time because she was doing an internship in my city. And we were just doing what we always do. We were both kind of bored, doing lots of photo shoots that summer because I had nothing else to do. And people just started like really enjoying like our sister duo and also like the shoots we were doing and talking about how fun they were, but like it just never really occurred to me that other people might want to do them. And so then I started like renting gowns because I was like, okay, I really want to do like fantasy stuff. Like, if you're collecting unemployment, you have to kind of figure out how you can sort of work the system in a way to make sure that you're still collecting your benefits. So I would like rent these gowns and they would mail them to me. And I one time just rented one and I wound up making one of those halo crown headpieces. And my sister and I went out, we did the photo shoot. I'd never called it the goddess session or anything, but it was like the most liked post I had ever made on Instagram. And I was just like, wait, whoa, I had no idea. Like all these people were saying like that they wanted to do it. And I was like, okay, wait, like this would be really cool. So a couple like months after that, I rented a couple more dresses and I offered like signups to do the shoots. And yeah, then I just started doing that all the time and until I sort of, finessed it to what it is now. But that was like literally just how it started. It was never like something that I planned on doing. I really just thought I was going to be a wedding photographer. And then as things went on and I realized how much I didn't miss it during the pandemic and how honestly like relieved I felt to not have to do the weddings.
Hmm.
I started to like really shift my mindset into like, would this be possible? So there was a lot of crossover for a while between like my wedding career and then what I do now. But up until, I mean, the last year was the first year that I really didn't do like weddings. Like I had maybe two, and this year I have like one. But I was able to kind of like wean off of them, which was nice.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of like the weird roundabout way that it sort of happened just based off of being bored during the COVID lockdown.
But you went from like very high stress environment of wedding photography to
Yeah.
the exact opposite sort of playful
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
Um, I was wondering, because your photography is very creative. You bring all those accessories. So how important is storytelling in what you do? Do you come up with little scenarios in your head?
So I think storytelling is really important for my business, but not like so much for maybe my clients. Like um I think like some people come with kind of like a story of their own maybe, but when it comes to just like maybe a fantasy sort of story, I would say that that isn't extremely relevant. Like um I do a lot of storytelling with my content, and I think that's like how I've been able to have a lot of success on social media is by telling the stories of my clients. Um, so it's hugely important in that sense because sometimes I'm telling the story of my client and like maybe their specific journey if they feel comfortable, or sometimes I'm telling more of the story of just like us working together and like maybe there was some like crazy reason why, or like they made some really huge trip to come to me or something, and I'll kind of tell that story. But I don't like focus too much on there being a story for the shoot, or like a fantastical type of story for them. Like it's kind of funny because I don't think that like I think I do get a lot of people who are really interested in fantasy and interested in like fantasy books and movies and stuff, but it's really actually not the case for everybody. And like I even like when I first started doing this, like I wouldn't have even said that I was someone who was really into like fantasy as like most people might think of it. And like, only like kind of a few years into my journey did I start like reading fantasy fiction and stuff. But it's always been like more about like inner child play and like kind of escaping like the reality that we're in versus like anything sort of
Mm.
magical or something
I
like
mean,
that.
you touched on that, like you were talking about your childhood with your sister, and it's always such a lovely way to grow up with a playmate who you really sort of have
Mm-hmm.
so much in common with. So, when it comes to those elements of play and letting your inner child take over, as children, we're so happy to pretend, we become warriors, queens, astronauts, from one moment to the next. And then we let go of it. And in adulthood, especially, I think in some ways, especially for women, we're not encouraged to remain playful, or, the amount of labor women do. It kind of takes second stage. So how does one recapture it?
Yeah, I think that's definitely like a big part of like the working with older adults is like that element of play um because I think like you see stuff like all the time. Like I get videos and things on the internet of people giving their grandmother like their first Barbie doll, and like the grandmother like they're crying, and it's like so emotional. And like the comments that I get a lot. I mean, I I never really like totally expected like the amount of people who say that they're like sobbing when they see my videos, because like to me it's so like lighthearted, but for so many people I think it's like really hitting a nerve of either they really miss this aspect of like youth and childhood, or like they never experienced it. Like so many people grow up in like totally different types of environments, and like I'm lucky that I grew up in a household where that type of stuff was encouraged and I had siblings to play with. But then there's like some people who like are there's a lot of people who didn't get that, who grew up in a household where maybe they just didn't feel safe, maybe they had no one to play with, they had responsibilities that were so far outside of like the realm of what someone their age should be doing. I mean, people have experienced extreme hardships, and like the older I get, the more I learn about how hard some people's childhoods are. And so I think that yeah, it comes from I get different types of people, and that's why it can be so like emotional for people. People will say like I don't know why this is making me cry, when it's like a lighthearted song and everyone's smiling, but it's just like really brings out like this, I don't know, deep desire for just like yeah, joyful play. I think like as adults we need like imagination and whimsy like more than ever. Like our lives are things can be so serious and so heavy all of the time. So this is like a great little opportunity for people to just like kind of like become that child in like a totally like a safe space. Like I don't always like that term, but like I am like there to really provide that and to let people just like fully immerse themselves in it. And I think that's just like such a beautiful thing. I love to get to do that for people.
Mm. I think it's sometimes we need someone to give us permission to act a little bit foolish.
Yes.
And especially in for I feel like for so many women, especially in in my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, they were actively discouraged from acting childlike. And
Yeah,
that was, like you have to be serious. You have to be serious about your responsibilities. You have to, and there's not much space left for that playfulness.
yeah,
So it's and even, but I think even now in some ways, like we're constantly encouraged to compare ourselves to others, and social media does a lot in that respect to kind of make us feel like we have to compare ourselves, or are we good enough, are we sort of talented enough, even for people in the arts, where you'd think we engage in a lot of kind of playful behavior in whether you're like a writer or an artist, of any description, but there's so much sort of pressure to monetize the joy as well.
yeah. There's definitely that, and then I think there's also like the aspect of like feeling like I just remember being a kid and like starting to feel like, okay, well, like we're in middle school now, and like there's certain groups of girls who like want to have a boyfriend, and like they don't want to have like the type of birthday party where like there's games. Like they want to have their birthday party at, like something that's just not fun, like that's more like an adult type of party. And like then there's me, and like I'm only 12, but I'm still feeling like such a kid. And I remember being like horrified in a way when like I got to middle school and like everybody wanted a boyfriend, and I was just like, wait, like I am just like a little child. So I think there's like a lot of pressure. There was, especially, I mean, like 20 years ago when I was 10, where there was the pressure to kind of grow up. But then like now I think it's even worse because of social media. Like I feel so sad sometimes for like girls now feeling like they have to, do anti-aging skincare, and they need to be like doing really adult makeup, and like, oh, well, if you act like too like babyish or like a kid, like you're gonna get made fun of on the internet for like your whole school to see. Yeah, I think there is such like I don't know, an unfortunate like amount of pressure for, I mean, all kids, but girls to just be adults way too soon. Um, and
I
so
thought we were supposed to be better by now.
I know, and but unfortunately, it just like gets worse. And then like you get to like be a certain like in your preteen years, and it's such an awkward time. But you also start noticing that like certain things don't even seem available to you. Like I remember going to Disney World when I was 12, and they had this like um bippity boppity boutique where you could get like glitter in your hair, and you got a little costume, and like wanting to do it so bad. And like number one, like wouldn't have been able to afford it because it was like so expensive.
Because it's
But
Disney.
it's Disney, and feeling like such like a sadness over the fact that like I was never gonna get to experience like Disney World from like a little kid's perspective, and like feeling like such like this like longing for something that I never got to do, and also feeling like, wow, like even at Disney World, like I am not allowed to like be a kid in like the most like kid friendly like place. I still felt like, well, even if like that was an option for me, I wouldn't even be able to do it because it would be like too embarrassing at like 12 years old.
But it's
Um,
really sad because Disney World is just so expensive to go to in the
yeah.
first place.
Oh
And for
yeah.
people to and to have that out there for children to see, it just creates like another level of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, but
Same.
this bit of magic you cannot partake in, little
I know.
peasant.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah.
Literally. I mean, I think there's even like a rule that like if you're over a certain age, like you can't dress up as the characters, which is just so sad. And yeah, all kinds of things. I mean, like even like trick or treating, like I don't know, maybe that's not a UK thing, but like on Halloween,
Mhm.
like
Yeah,
feeling like
we
you can't
do
trick
we do it
or
here, yeah.
treat, like it's too babyish to trick or treat when you're only like 10, 11 years old. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah, that's sad. There's a cut-off date. I mean, at some point you're just scrounging off your neighbors, like when you're past a certain age point, isn't
yeah, I mean, after a certain point,
it?
it feels like the cutoff just gets like younger and
I don't know
younger.
why. I like Snickers bars. Why can't I go?
I know. I even remember going in high school because I was like, what the heck? Like, I'm only 14. And I just still felt like, why like can't I participate in this thing and going to some houses and then being like, aren't you guys a little old for this? And I was like, I felt like
I
so
hate that phrase. I hate
bad. I
that
was like,
phrase because it's sort of social policing of our behavior in a way that's actually so terribly damaging. It's like, the kind of old style of like your grandma or your mom like telling you around like the age of 30, it's like, maybe you've outgrown this style of dress, maybe you're a bit too old for those frills, or you're a bit too old for this. And it starts this kind of sense that you're too old to play. You
yeah,
should be serious now.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like I don't know if it's because I had a twin or because I had younger siblings, like significantly younger siblings. Like I just didn't like feel ready to let go of all of that stuff at like the same time that other people seem to, or like maybe at home like they were being told by their parents that it was time, but like that was just not happening in my household. Like I don't think anybody was ever telling me that it like I couldn't do something because of my age. So so yeah, that was like always like a really jarring part of like my
Hmm.
teen years and my preteen years, and so that's like I think that's a common
Yeah.
experience for a lot of people, which is like why I think this type of photo shoot, like I never expected that this would be able to be my primary thing that I do. Like I just never thought there would be the demand for it, and like I am blown away every single year that I get more and more and more and more people that want to do it. Like I thought at a certain point, like Maine is a really small state. I would run out. I would just run out of people who were interested, who could afford it. But like, I mean, people are flying to me on a regular basis. People are coming from Canada. I get people in the UK. I get people. I have a huge audience of people in Australia. I mean,
Hmm.
I just never knew. I
I mean,
never
I
knew.
wish you were closer as well.
I know. I would love to go to the UK because I get people all the time who are, oh, are you ever gonna come to the UK? And I'm like, oh,
Maybe
I
that's
mean,
something to do.
yeah, I mean, take the goddess photo shoot on a world tour.
The traveling magician helping us, reconnect with our childlike personas.
That's so funny that you say magician because the other day I was like, I randomly just sort of referred to myself as the magician, and I was like, wait, I am kind of a magician. Like not like in the classic sense, but like as in like I'm bringing the magic.
Here's you are. I
Not
think
like
it's lovely. And I think there's, people, like you say, do lose that sense of kind of, childlike wonder and playfulness
yeah,
way too early. I mean, I personally feel like we shouldn't lose it at all, but
no.
there's and there's like I think there's a lot of wisdom in realizing that there's no prizes given for making your life smaller and making yourself smaller.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's I think, if you don't live life the way you want to, nobody's going to give you a second chance, isn't it?
And like I totally understand that like it's not for everybody, and people will ask me like, "Oh, like well, what I really want my grandmother to do this, but she really really doesn't want to." I think she'd be really grumpy the whole time, but she would probably do it. And I'm like, you know what? They don't need to do it. Like they don't have to. It's it'd be really great if they did, but I am not looking to torture anyone. I totally like understand that it's not everybody's cup of tea, not everybody's ready for something like this. And like that's okay too. There's other ways that you can explore playfulness and joy and childlike wonder without dressing up for a photo shoot.
Yeah,
So
I mean, that's true. Do you have any like nice stories about how people reacted to seeing themselves through your eyes when we see the final product?
so I don't usually like see them like live reacting to their photos because they just get them like digitally. But yeah, I mean, I had a photo shoot this summer. The daughter of this like 88-year-old woman, she had reached out to me and she said, my mother has stage 4 pancreatic cancer and she is probably only going to live another couple of months. And I would really like to do this with her like before she gets like to a point where like she couldn't be in the car, like they lived in a couple states away. And so I was like, yes, I mean, like, of course we can schedule this like as soon as possible, get them on the schedule. And I was like, if by then it turns out that like she can't make the like 5 hour drive, I'm happy to come to you. And it wound up working out really well. And she showed up with her dad as well, and like also her own daughter, so her mom's granddaughter. And she was like, I just want to warn you, my dad is really not sure about this. Like at first, he like didn't want her to do it at all, didn't want his wife to do the photo shoot at all. But like kind of ultimately was like convinced enough to make the drive and be there at the shoot. But she's like, I just want you to know that he's really on the fence about things. And I was like, okay, that doesn't bother me because this is a common feeling for people, nervousness, especially when it's like a younger person bringing a parent. Um, and so we start the shoot, and like there's always a little nervousness, but like we get her into the costume, like we get her comfortable. We're maybe like 20 to 30 minutes into doing the photo shoot, and I get the husband to do a couple of pictures. I was like, hey, like he kept joking around about wanting to put on one of the dresses. And I was like, you're like, put one on, like, go ahead, put one on. But like, I don't know, he was like, kind of like, I was just kidding, but gets in the photo just like in his regular clothes. And I was like, this is super fun. Um, we wind up kind of like relocating to like get a new backdrop, and the daughter like she grabs my arm, and I even have this on video, and she was like, this is the best money that I have ever spent. My parents are having the most fun that I have seen them have in years. And I was just like, oh my God, like I'm so glad. She's like, my dad is absolutely loving this. And I was really excited to hear, like, obviously the priority was, the woman who had cancer, but I was like, to have like the dad be having a good time after he was so hesitant. We carry on with the shoot, and I turn around and he is like putting on a crown, and he's like grabbing props, and he's like in the photo shoot. The whole family is in it together. And like by the time it was over, it was just like such like a different sort of energy from like when we started, and there was like all this nervousness, which is like typically how things go, to this just like they were able to have this like sort of last road trip with their mom slash grandma, and like have this special time together, have these memories forever. And then as things kind of progressed on, the video that I posted from their shoot wound up getting like 300 plus thousand views or something, and like they felt so famous. They were getting all these comments, and so they were so excited. They were like constantly checking and like updating the parents on the views. And
Oh,
people were like huge fan. I had put in this one little quote from the dad slash husband, and like people were like, you know, fawning over him like he was some like heartthrob, and he's just like, he's about to like lose his wife, but he's getting this like positive like reaction, like just this joy that like I just felt like was so needed for all of them. And since that photo shoot has happened, I have like been in touch with the family like multiple times. Like they constantly tell me how meaningful the experience was for them. And then, like updating me on her health. And then when she did like eventually pass away, just like again, just like telling me like how amazing this once in a lifetime thing was for like their whole entire family. So that was like one of the most special like experiences that I have had. Like I have similar stories to this, but this one like always like is called a special place in my heart just because of like the amount of people that were involved and like the fact that as far as I know, like this is my only client that like has passed away since doing the shoot. So just to know like how the experience has like lived on and like to have the photos, like how meaningful that is, like it's just like so awesome.
I mean,
So
this is such a privilege to like be told explicitly that you have been that to people, it's just because I think as we go for life, like there are moments where we might, I just say something or do something that has an impact,
yeah.
but then to actually know it, to see it and to see the reaction and, that was, because, his like a person close to him was dying, so he must have, the amount of stress he was likely under, and you
Mm-hmm.
managed to take it away for a moment. So
Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's like hard to explain. And I'm really lucky that my clients give me like a lot of validation. And it doesn't always happen, but like and I don't ever like seek it out, and it's totally okay when I don't get it, but like it is always like so awesome to get like that type of validation because like oh I can advertise it as like oh it's like this really meaningful thing and like it's empowering, but like sometimes like you don't always know like is that people's experience, do they feel empowered, like is this like as meaningful to them as I want it to be. And so like when people tell you that it, as a matter of fact it is, like oh yeah that feels
I
really
mean,
nice.
I think when you book a goddess photo shoot, it's because you want to feel empowered, and it's because you want to show people that, like you want to show yourself that you can be that. So
Yeah,
I think you definitely, it would not be false advertising to say to say that it is empowering.
yeah,
So
I
mm, what are your sort of photography inspirations? I would ask you, like maybe a photographer, a painter you admire.
so this is like the photographers that I feel like inspire me pretty much don't have a very similar style, I would say. But Gregory Crewdson is a photographer who I always loved, just sort of the surreal scenes that he would create. And he's sort of local, like he's in the New England area. And I think when I was in college, I felt so like uninspired by New England because I lived here my whole life. And I was like, if I just lived in California, like I'd be a better photographer. I lived in Utah, I'd be like a better photographer. I'd be able to make cooler pictures. And then to like have this photographer whose work I thought was so stunning, and then to find out that he's from like Massachusetts, I was like, oh my god. So I really like kind of latched on to that, and it became a big inspiration for me. I wouldn't say that like you could compare our photos side by side and be like, yes, I see the inspiration. Like he's not doing fantasy so much as he's creating just these like surreal moments, but they just like to me they just evoke like such a strong emotion. There's this photography series that I always really enjoyed, and I think like some of this inspiration comes from the fact that I went to photography school. Not everybody will recognize these things, but there's this photo series called The Americans. I can't even remember now off the top of my head the name of the photographer, but I just like it's a documentary series of just different sort of like vignettes of American culture. And I just like to me like just like there was such like this feeling of nostalgia that I sort of felt of like a time that I wasn't even born at. But like that's always been a thing like that has been really important to me for photography is like this feeling of nostalgia. And while like I don't think my photos necessarily on their own maybe like evoke a feeling of nostalgia, like it is like such a nostalgic experience because it just like really brings you back childhood. So I would say those are like two things that always really stuck with me throughout my like photography journey.
Thank you for that. And thank you so much for coming on the show. It
Yeah.
was really lovely chatting with you and hearing the stories you have to tell. So I will link to your website under the video. So for people wanting to check out Ruby's work, look at the description below the video.
Thank you so much.